Today I'm going to show you how to make a reverse bass from scratch in Serum 2. If you're new here, I'm Krosper. I make hard dance presets, tools, generators, and production systems for producers who want sounds that are ready to hit without wasting half the session building everything from zero. And real quick, before we start, if you want the full Krosper workflow, that's exactly what the ultimate bundle is for. Sounds, tools, systems, everything in one place. Link is in the description. All right, let's build this. We start from the init preset. First thing I do is create an LFO in envelope mode, and I shape it to get that classic reverse bass movement. Then I map that LFO straight to the level, all the way, so the bass already starts breathing like a reverse bass instead of just playing like a normal sustained note. After that, I bring the random down to 0, and I drop the oscillator 1 octave lower. Then I start scrolling through different waveforms until I find one that gives me the kind of tone I want. That part matters a lot because reverse bass is not just about the rhythm. The texture decides whether it feels old school, sharper, dirtier, or more modern. Once I've got something that feels right, I show the timeline where I already have a kick ready, plus another layer reinforcing that kick. And I let the reverse bass play with it so you can already hear the direction in context. Then I go into the effects. First, hard clip distortion. And I take that same LFO I already made for the reverse bass shape, and I map it to the drive as well. So now, every time the reverse bass opens up, the distortion rises with it. That instantly gives it more bite and more movement. After that, I add an EQ and boost one frequency to bring out a bit more character. Then, I add multiband compression. I lower the threshold, lower the attack, add a little gain, and push the highs, the low band, and the below a bit more, so the whole thing feels more controlled and more solid. Then I add utility and set bass mono at around 200 Hz. Now from here, I start showing different ways to get more movement out of the same idea. I map an LFO to the wavetable position, so the sound starts shifting over time instead of staying static. Then I try sync on the same oscillator and map that same LFO to it, just to show how easy it is to get a different reverse bass texture from the same core shape. After that, I turn on oscillator B, bring the level all the way down, random to 0, and instead of using sync on oscillator A, I switch over to PD on oscillator B. Then I start pushing that a little so you can hear how much the texture changes. And that's really one of the main points in this video. the reverse bass shape is working, the sound itself can go in a lot of different directions depending on the waveform, the warp mode, and how much movement you give it. So I keep changing the waveform on oscillator B, then I turn that off again, go back to oscillator A, and keep trying different waveforms there too, until I land on something I like more. I keep checking everything with the kick. Also show that if you find a waveform you like but it doesn't have enough sub, you can just turn on the sub oscillator, drop it 1 octave, leave the level at 0, and map the same LFO to that level. That way the sub follows the same reverse bass movement and fills out the bottom end properly. Then I try 0 square distortion as well, just to test another color and hear how it changes the tone. Once I finally get a version I like, I print the kick and the reverse bass together into a new track. But before I do that, I group them and add a parallel reverb on the group. I automate the chain volume so it only comes in during the first moments, just enough to give it extra width and impact without washing it out. On that reverb chain, I also add EQ on the side and cut the low end around 200 to 300 Hz so there are no phase issues. And then I use utility again with bass mono around 170 to 200 Hz. Then I print everything. And now for the fun part. To hear it in a real drop, I open my Screech generator, generate a melody, and load one of my new Vital presets on top of it, so you can hear how the reverse bass sits inside an actual hard dance context. And this is exactly the kind of workflow I'm always trying to build tools for. If you want sounds that are already ready to go, that's what Hard Dance Weapons for Vital is for. And if you want the full Krosper system with the tools, the packs, the generators, and the bigger production workflow, check the Ultimate Bundle in the description. So yeah, that's the process. Start with the shape, get the movement right, then use distortion, compression, wavetable movement, warp modes, and layering to push it into the texture you want. And once the core shape is there, you can take it in a lot of different directions without rebuilding it from zero. If you want more tutorials like this, subscribe. And if you want the sounds and tools behind this kind of workflow, links are in the description. That's how you turn sound into power.